second pass forms. What does that even mean? More subtle changes, actually.
Who knew?
So it's that, that's the theme of this whole tutorial. Everything is about subtlety. But again, like with every other chapter before starting this, made a bunch of notes, and that's the first thing I'll be correcting. That's always how I start. I always correct the notes that I've made after I've been able to more critically evaluate the sculpt. So that's some slight proportion changes and changing some of the features a little bit to make them more representative of what I have in mind. And what I have in mind kind of evolves all the time. You see a new reference and you think, oh, actually, I want to take that part from this reference and that part from that reference. That obviously changes if you're having to match one person. But I never do that because that's really hard.
Yeah, it's also one of these being like, you can ask, why didn't you just show us A to B? Why do you show all these steps where you're doing proportional things? Well, we want to show you how it's actually done.
Yeah.
The thing is, whenever you're doing anything like this, it's not a journey from A to B. It's a journey from A to like F. Yeah. And we got to show you the steps in between. And if you don't show the steps in between, then we could do a tutorial which is cleaner and they don't have those steps, but that doesn't have any learning in it.
No.
You want to learn. We're not interested in you going from or making this character. Like that does nothing for us. What we're interested in is you making 1,000 of these characters where you can learn a method for it. It's kind of like, teach a man to fish instead of giving him a fish.
Yeah.
If we were to give you a fish, you'd be like, cool.
Now I have a fish.
Now I have a fish. We want to give you the method for doing this yourself.
Yeah.
And that method is just, honestly, it's a bit messy sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just how CT is. I mean, at this point, I'm past the point where I'm struggling with my sanity and, self-doubt and whatever. But, I know there's still things to improve, but at least I know at this point that, okay, I can make what I want this to make or want this to look like. So now it's just about tweaking what I have.
It's kind of funny if you were to have a camera in the office where Morten is sculpting, you would see like in the beginning, first hour would be like hell yeah, I'm awesome because it's looking good. Then it would be just Morten being curled in a ball of anxiety for like around an hour, and then be like, oh yeah.
This part right here, which I just messed up a little quick there, the glabella. Is that's the glabella, right?
That's the glabella.
It's what we talked about before with the caveman-like structures. For women, it's more female or more feminine if you make it flat. You have this flat spot right there on the forehead that tends to produce a more feminine look. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we're trying to show you on our own heads now, but we realized
I was like putting my hand on my head, like, oh wait, I'm not a woman.
Yeah. Also, there is no camera.
Yeah. But also the shape of your forehead, the shape of the forehead for women can be different from men. I mean, they tend to be kind of the same, but you can shift them to be more womanly, I suppose.
It's all about subtlety.
Yeah. With a man, if you think of a box shape, it's just straight up and down. Maybe with a woman, you want to pull it just back just slightly to give a little bit of an angle. And you have that especially with African people. That part can actually get pulled back quite a lot, even also the back of the skull.
There's also so much to do with how the environment changes you as well. If you actually start looking into that, it's crazy. There was one photo, pretty famous photo of a trucker who he'd been in the sun for one side of his face had been in the sun for like 30 years because his left side of the face was in the sun and it was wrinkled as like crazy. It looked like he was like 100, and then the other side of it, his right side of the face was way younger because it didn't have any sun damage. And you can often see this as well when it comes to men versus women. At least if you're looking at like our grandparents' generation, where my grandfather he was a construction worker or a manual laborer, and then my grandmother, she worked in an office. So obviously one of them is going to be way more rugged. One is going to be exposed to way more rain and sun and elements. So you're going to get more skin damage. And if you're looking at the woman who's been working in an office her entire life, working with her hand, like just not working with the hands in a crude way, but working in a, you're touching a typewriter and stuff like that. It's never seen sun. It's going to be way more translucent and way finer. So there are so many factors as well, just in terms of environment, which you just got to think about as well.
Yeah. One nice little tip that you saw there with the ear was just isolating it to just make sure that I can work on that, and I don't hit any other areas. And sometimes some things are kind of hidden a little bit. So using the select with the lasso or marquee tool is a nice little tool to use. And also as a bonus tip, I used Shift Control and X to expand my selection. You can use Shift Control and S to shrink that in.
It's a real nice tip. I do this a lot as well.
One thing that I wanted to work towards later in this project, once everything is established, the forms are there, is trying to get a little bit of aging into the sculpt. Now that is easier said than done. It's not as much of a challenge. So there's different challenges between men and women when it comes to this. For a man, the challenge is how do I get them in there and to look correct. And for a woman, I feel the challenge is how do I get it in there without it looking like too extreme. I don't want to age it too much. So your aging process has to be, again, a lot more subtle. Tiny defined wrinkles, and just thinking about where do things actually wrinkle. When you move your face a lot, do you smile a lot? Well, then you get more wrinkles. Do you have dimples? And what kind of wrinkles do you have around the eyes? Do you smile a lot? Then you might have more crow's feet. Those kinds of subtle things.
Yeah, it's also so much subtlety when it comes to how you age as well. When it comes to the difference between a 15-year-old and a 20-year-old, it's not that much of a difference. Difference between a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old, maybe not that much difference. Difference between a 15-year-old and a 30-year-old, definitely difference.
Yeah.
There are just so many subtleties. Difference between like 23 and 32, like that. That's tricky. That's where like you can clearly see the one is older than the other. But if you were to like intellectually analyze it, that's very hard. It's like it's probably like a bit more plane changes, the skin is a bit less elastic. It's drooping down slightly more.
Not so much a woman-specific thing, but the part above the mouth can be a little misleading. You can see how the lips sort of have this ramp to them, so like it goes out. But the top part above your lip actually doesn't curve down and up like that. It's actually convex. So there's a small convex part right between your nose and sort of like going down to your mouth. It might look misleading here because it looks like it's actually concave because of the lips, but it's only the lips that makes that concave look. The fat and the muscles right above there actually make it a little bit convex instead. It's such a subtle thing, but these are the kind of subtle things that you want to pay attention to, especially when you're sculpting women, because these can make all the difference. Because there's not, like with men, the focus in a sculpt tends to be, the focus of, I think, any sculpt and expression tends to be the eyes, because that's where we look the most. And that's also where you can detail the most. You have a lot of wrinkles, especially in older men, and maybe a wrinkly face, a very pronounced nasolabial fold. But where is the focus on a woman if you try to keep everything soft, right? So your focus there has to be on the subtle changes between forms, which is tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, soft without blurry.
Yeah,
exactly. That was a note which my supervisor at NPC gave me all the time, soft without blurry. And I was like, the hell does that even mean? Because we're like, blurry is blurry, but it's not. The eyes currently, they're soft, but they're not just a blob. This whole soft without blurry is going to become more and more clear as we go along the series.
Yeah.
But they're defined, they're just elegant.
Yeah, and you can see now that there's one thing that I think people tend to underestimate with the eyebrows is that they actually change the form from a three-quarter point of view quite a lot, because they tend to be quite sharp. at the edge there. So just having a subtle hint of eyebrows at this stage already makes it look more human. Because it can look a little bit scary when you don't have any eyebrows. And again, it's trying to look at the model from different angles, not just being focused on just the front of the face, because then you tend to end up with a flat look, and it doesn't look very appealing. It doesn't look very correct.
No.
That part there with the nose is actually, it's something that I'll go in and fix at a later point as well. But from the bridge of the nose going down into the cheek, you actually have kind of a flat plane going down. If you thin it like it's thin at mine at the moment, it tends to have this sort of plastic surgery kind of look, kind of like you've had your nose cut away a little bit. I'm personally not into that look. Some people probably are. But if you want to make it feel more natural, you want to add that little bit of fat and a little bit of skin falling off the bridge of the nose. And you can see here, if you look at a reference between hooded eyelids and not hooded eyelids, like the one I'm sculpting here, you'll be able to clearly see the difference. It might be hard to understand if you're not looking at a reference directly, but the eyes sit very differently in the head. They might sit deeper as well. So making hooded eyelids can be easier if you pull out your eyes to the front of the face a little more. Going between the perspective view and non-perspective view and checking your silhouette is something that I do even when I'm not designing something, if I'm not doing character design, but it still helps me to evaluate certain forms. Just because sometimes with perspective you can get a little bit distracted. Sometimes it can look a little fishy. So it's a good way to just occasionally, it's just like changing your angle, like looking at it from below or whatever. You change perspective and you go into silhouette mode. You can do that by just hitting the V key, changing everything to black. That just allows you to objectively just only focus on silhouette and just look at the form, the overall form.
Get the silhouette right and everything will follow from there.